Hello, everyone, and welcome back to JLMI's Summer of Sugoi. I am Bill, as always, and today I am here with probably the most influential influencer on the internet right now. His hair is platinum, his shirt is black, and he is popping over there in New York as we speak. Hello, Alex York.
Hello, how are you doing, Bill?
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
So, Alex, some of our audience might know who you are already, but some might not. So I just wanted to let everyone know that some people might call you a musician, an educator, an entertainer, a composer, like all these different things. But how would you go about describing yourself?
I'd say that there's one word that is what I aspire to.
Okay.
I have been called it, and it's always what I aspire to, and it is kakehashi. Do you know kakehashi?
Please explain the idea of kakehashi for us.
Exactly. So kakehashi, for those of you learning Japanese, means a bridge that connects people. And this may be an abstract concept, but whether it's in my songwriting or television activities or empowering people to learn English, I always seek to be a means of bridging people through communication, crossing boundaries, or rather crossing linguistic and national boundaries, since I've had experiences in both America and Japan. And yeah, so I appreciate your referencing the various things I've done. But yeah, song experience as a songwriter, television personality, performer and educator and entrepreneur. So that's sort of the situation.
Interesting. I think it's kind of cool to refer to yourself or maybe aspire to be something that's so abstract and not really, just go out there and drop a job title. Like when I grew up, I want to be a fireman, but you're kind of talking about how you want to find your place in the world and how you want to get through things, not necessarily what exactly you want to do, but how you want to be of service to others. And I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm looking for my place in the world. I think we all should be confident on what we have to offer and rather, as you said, use our abilities to be of service and connect with people, because I think there are many ways we can exist. Now, this is getting even more abstract, but I agree with you. We don't really need a one sort of title or katagaki, maybe someone would say on a business card. For those of you who are going to be dealing in Japan, there's the business card culture. But even that is changing. And I think thanks to the internet, thanks to just multimedia and sort of the future of technology, we don't have to be constrained to one sort of title.
Now, you mentioned earlier a little bit about, things that you produce, things that that represent you, your work. And I think one of your biggest hits up until now has been the bilingual YouTube hit, which is entitled American Boy. And this was a video about your love of Japanese language, culture, food, etc. So I'd kind of like to know, what kind of demographic were you going towards with that video? And how did the pretty large success of that video change your trajectory, change your career at all? I'd just like to know about that if I can.
Well, thank you for the kind description. So yeah, I mean, that song was really fun because it lent itself to visual content. I have experience as a video editor and I'm an artist, that I basically just wanted to put this in a visual form. If you check out the video, Alex York, American Boy, you'll see what I mean. It's pretty colorful and fun, and hope you enjoy it. That video, it's interesting. It's kind of like a lot of things happen at once. There was a confluence of different factors. I was already doing some Japanese television, I was lucky enough to have opportunities or people enter my life who guided me. And I was working with and still working with great people in music production, doing festivals in America. So I wouldn't say it completely kind of like I was like picked up by the heavens and then taken somewhere, but it did give a lot of exposure and made me appreciate the power, especially of television in Japan, because it's being featured on Japanese television is what delivered it to more people.
Yeah, it was picked up in a lot of kind of like variety bangumi tokushus and kind of introduced in that way, like, hey, look what we found this week. Everyone check it out, kind of a corner, right?
Yeah, it was great. And that was surreal to be contacted by people. But that's happened several times in my life where going with my instinct and creating content and coming from a place of love and fun and trying to connect with people and creating content, well, then it's been discovered by the right person and led to more things. So I try to kind of live my life by that, like constantly learn, try to create things that help people. And it seems that it works out that then people who offer more exposure or opportunities find me. So, and I think that's something any of us can do if you sort of tap into your strengths and what you're passionate about. And as you said, service, empathy, you'll pick up into something in the zeitgeist in the world, and maybe media or someone or a friend or teacher will find you.
That's interesting, because I think a lot of people now maybe kind of start with the end goal in mind, thinking, I want to become this, or I want to earn this, and so I'm going to do that. But the idea of starting something just, with this simple idea of, oh, I think this is good and I'm able to do this and I'd like to share this, but not really thinking about, and I want to get nantoka amount of views in the end. It's like, I think that's kind of a pure way that people kind of tap into. And so when, as a viewer, you see that it's quite pure and quite, for lack of a better word, like innocent, it's more likable, I think, in the end, no?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that the end goal we can never predict. That being said, to throw in a little bit of a mujun, contradiction, when I was learning Japanese, I think my goal was 10 kanji a day when I was studying on my own, or maybe it's 20. So I do think that, especially for language learning, which is relevant, I imagine, to viewers, it does help to have a benchmark of something that you want to accomplish. This works in exercise. I'm going to do 10 push-ups today, and then 20, etc. With Japanese, with language study, with English, I think it is good. While you may not know the end goal, I want to be able to talk about sushi with someone in Japanese in 2 years or something. So I think it is good to have specific goals that are connected to skills and studying. And for me, actually, I remember one of the goals I had was to be able to read handwritten menus at Japanese restaurants, because I'm really because I'm really into food, and people who go to Japan, if you're into Japanese food, or even in New York or in cities, when there are Japanese restaurants with a Japanese clientele, they'll have an English menu, but it will usually not include, or often not include, daily specials or things that are just a little bit of stock of. So the good stuff, the interesting stuff to me, would be on pieces of paper on the wall. And you're probably familiar with this if you've been to Japan, to izakaya, like bars or sort of like casual kind of pub. They have this, and handwriting is somewhat of a challenge to read in any language. So my goal is I want to be able to go to Japan or to even my local restaurant and be able to read what the special is. And that goal was accomplished, and that felt really, really good. And it may sound silly, but for any of us, you just think, what sort of visually, like, what do you imagine? Maybe it's playing a game, playing Final Fantasy, like in Japanese or something. So I do think those concrete goals help with the overall kind of, maybe your direction. Don't have to, it's just directed by your passion. So, I like Japanese culture, I like Japanese, or I like tennis or whatever. And then you may not know where that goes, but in order to get to a higher level of competency and opportunities, then you take step by step, 10 kanji or etc.
That is the first time I have ever heard that specific of a goal, and I really love it because a lot of people, they have in the back of their minds that a lot of the menus here in Japan are going to have pictures. And so you'll be able to point at what you want, if you're ever having trouble. But the fact that that is very true, a lot of the handwritten menus are just for today's specials, or like a local cafe that changes their menu every day. Like being able to read that and being able to read that individual's handwriting is such a confusing issue that you come across so much more often than I thought I would.
That being said, if you're just starting to study Japanese, as you said, Bill, you can go to Japan and there are picture menus. You're going to be fine. The food is good. I'm just sort of like, I'm just like really into food and sort of unusual things that probably would not be palatable to a lot of other Americans. So I just really wanted to experience those things. So yeah, it's having the goal and the handwritten menu or whatever you want, but fear not, you will have delicious food. You go to Japan, you can't read kanji and handwriting yet.
So when you were, spending time in Japan, can you tell us one of the best restaurants you were able to visit after you feel like you had accomplished that goal of the handwriting expert? Like, where did that take you?
So there's a specific restaurant one of my colleagues from Sony brought me to, hidden in a building on the third floor, as many Japanese restaurants are, not some of the good restaurants are not on the main floor. And it's run, at that point, just run by a very sweet Japanese woman and her daughter. And the restaurant has now still been in business, I think, for over 30 years. And it's really just for locals, and had a lot of handwritten items on the menu. And I actually was able to identify the restaurant. It's called Tochinoki. If anyone looks it up, there are a few restaurants named that, but this one's called Tochinoki. I would recommend that you have someone who can read Japanese if you go here, because it might be a little complex. But yeah, so I went there and I was eating, and we got a little bit of like a little appetizer, and it was like on the house, and I guess I said, "Is this namero?" And the proprietor said, "Yeah, how did you know that?" So anyway, so learning about Japanese food led to that experience. And now when I go to Japan, I go there at least once a week. And the staff and the owner and the mother, I became very close with them. So we stay in touch.
Oh, that's nice. Is that in Tokyo?
Yes, it's in Tokyo, near JLMI area.
Okay, cool. We will not give out the specific location just in case it gets over inundated with many, many people trying to get that namero, but just for all of you, JLMI. So you mentioned before starting out with the simple attainable goal of 10 or 20 things a day. So setting goals is something that, personally I like to do as well, because it keeps you on track. It keeps you motivated in that sense. But I was kind of wondering how you specifically got started with Japanese, and if there were any other, techniques besides goal setting that you used in order to, get yourself going and really reach that level of fluency that you need in order to handle an interview or write text for a book.
Yeah, I would say the human element is really key. So it's, in my case, I ran into, coincidentally, an old friend from preschool who is born in America, speaks Japanese, and from her parents. And I had just studied in Italy and spoke some Italian. So I met her and I said, "Hey, I really want to learn Japanese. I'll teach you some basic Italian if you teach me some Japanese." And this became a language partner for me. And I think having that human element is really key. The great thing now is that you don't have to necessarily meet in person. You can,
Very true.
there are all sorts of opportunities online. So it's good to, I think, have that sort of feedback from someone, and also just seeing the person be excited that you're learning something. And if you're doing a language education, language partnership, it's also fun to teach, and that sort of communication is really fun. So I think finding some sort of human element where you can use the language, and that is really effective. And then also finding material that you can self-study with, because with any language, but especially Japanese, there's a decent amount of legwork you have to do, or not you have to do, but I would recommend doing on your own, just learning words and kanji and all this stuff. But this is really for any language. So it's finding materials to study with that are fun for you, accomplish whatever sort of study method and goals suits you.
Yeah, because I know that, having a language partner is, really motivating when they can see your progress and, you feel good about like maybe impressing them with something you didn't know last week. But as you said, I also think it's extremely important just to have something on the side or something that you do in your free time that you can refer back to, because without that, like how much can you really progress just by listening and maybe writing down what's said to you? That seems really, really confusing, especially with the different conjugations, the different kanji combinations that are being thrown at you all the time. Like, were there any specific parts of that? Like, oh, I'm having trouble with transitive verbs, or I can't get it when we move into Kansai dialect. Like, was there anything specifically really challenging to yourself as an individual student?
I would say listening comprehension when you're actually in Japan, and especially with older individuals who may have affectations or not speak clearly and speak quickly, that can be challenging. The language, in comparison, if you've studied Italian or Spanish or even English, it doesn't have a typical stress system. So in English, we say dessert and desert, which are basically the same pronunciation except for the timing and the emphasis. But in Japanese, it's sort of like a consistent sort of stream without that distinct stress to demarcate the words. And instead it's pitch accent. I'm kind of like I don't want to like freak people out with stuff. But anyway, listening comprehension was challenging, but it works. Like, you talk to people and you learn, and that's how you get to a place with any aspect of a language.
That's very true. Like, especially maybe the hyojungo, like the standard dialect that you're used to studying or listening to on, like a textbook CD. You rarely hear that in your everyday life, like you might hear it sometimes on the news, or maybe when someone is giving a speech, it's very, very formalized. But when you're trying to have those everyday interactions, like asking where this train gets off, or asking like, hey, do you have any Q-tips at the drugstore? Like just getting that dialect real quick back at you, you're like, well, I was not ready to learn where you're from. And it's kind of unsettling sometimes. Did you ever spend time in anywhere in Japan that was not Tokyo, like anywhere outside in other regions that may have had stronger accented speakers?
I did a homestay in Aichi, in the Aichi prefecture outside of Nagoya. And that has a forgiving dialect from my experience. So my host family spoke with certain non-Tokyoisms, non-Hyojungo kind of things, but it wasn't incomprehensible. And it was a nice introduction to different dialects of Japanese.
Did you become a big fan of azuki beans on your toast in the morning?
Yeah, I actually really love sandwiches that have red bean and butter, which is very popular from my experience in Nagoya. It's sort of an unusual combination, but if you can imagine, if you like jam or fruit preserves or jelly with butter, it's kind of that sensation, but with red bean having that chocolatey richness.
Oh man, that's a lot for my morning, but go for it. Absolutely go for it. So did you spend a lot of mornings in Komeda coffee, like getting that azuki beans on the side?
I spent a lot of mornings at the dining room table with my host family because they made breakfast and dinner for me. And it was incredible. Both very adept cooks, and I actually developed a love of natto, which is fermented soy, when I was there, and it was really fun.
The natto was fun?
Yeah, the whole experience. Being
the whole experience.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, I love natto.
I never heard anyone, describe as, oh, you should try natto. It's a great time. I never heard that before. I was surprised.
Well, it's fun for me, finding funky foods that
Mhm.
at first I have an aversion to. But if you know that like millions of people like them, you want to develop like the taste, like what is this? And just the human palate is malleable. So eventually
Mm.
you can start to distinguish and taste what makes something delicious. And this is probably an analogy to a lot of things, which is that you can sort of refine and strengthen, whether it's your listening comprehension or singing ability or exercise. I think food in that case with the natto was an example of being able to refine or rather modify my own perception of taste or things and then experience new deliciousness.
You brought up the idea of getting better at singing, and I really appreciate that because I have always been a big proponent of using karaoke for myself in order to study Japanese and maybe get better with my pronunciation or intonation. But you yourself, Alex, have gone above and beyond, and you have created. Thank you very much, by the way.
Thank you.
This is you, buddy.
This is yeah.
Yeah.
That my book. Thank you kindly for showing that. It's the English title would be "Sing Momotaro, Speak English." Momotaro is a classic Japanese folk song. The
Oh.
Japanese title is Momotaro utau dake de eigo ga hanaseru. And basically, the book uses traditional Japanese folk songs that I translated into English as a way of learning English. And English
Mm-mm.
speakers can look at the book as well and see the translations. So it's useful in that way for learning Japanese.
Yeah, because like
So,
you've
yeah,
probably heard these songs, living or just walking around a shopping center in Japan. Sometimes these are, played over the PA. And so
totally.
it's a really interesting concept of, combining the idea of someone's love for music and language learning. So I want to hear a little bit about the feedback that you've gotten so far. Have people, taken a liking to this? Have a lot of people been saying that this is helping me in a way that I didn't know I could be helped? Like, how has not the feedback, but how has the results been?
The results have been great. I say we because I worked with a publisher,
Mm,
Kadokawa. Uh, so yeah, anyway, been very grateful that the book actually has ranked consistently in the top 10 of English education, all English education books on Amazon. So that's Amazon Japan. So that's really cool. And in itself is a sign that there's interest. Numbers are great, but what's been really wonderful is hearing from people that they have found the book to be really effective in learning
mm,
English because it's fun. And actually, this is an important thing, I think, with language learning. But in the case of this book, neuroscience shows that singing and music actually increases your ability to learn language. It makes it easier to learn.
mm.
So, like karaoke, as you were saying, or karaoke. I'm sorry when I pronounce the Japanese words in English, I feel like it's kind of obnoxious to completely do them in a Japanese pronunciation. So karaoke, yeah, is very
Thank you.
useful. So um, yeah, so neuroscience shows that singing and listening to music is really effective for learning language. So if anyone watching, if you like certain anime or movies and they have
Mm,
theme songs and you study them, that'll be a great way of really having information permeate the brain.
mm, mm,
The
mm.
other elements the feedback that I've gotten that's been really encouraging is that readers have been really happy that the book preserves and promotes Japanese culture uh,
Uh,
through folk songs. And this is something that is really near and dear to me because I love Japanese culture and I want it to be shared more with the world. And by putting the songs in English, the reviews and feedback I've gotten have said that it seems to encourage greater knowledge of these songs.
mm, mm,
Momotaro,
mm.
and Sagito Kame and all these different songs.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I totally agree with that. I noticed that you weren't really localizing it as much as you were translating it. And so in that sense, like even like as you said, when English speakers are looking at it, you kind of think like, huh, what is this though? I've never even heard of this before. For example, one of the things that stuck out for me in the biggest way was round your waist, millet dumplings you carry. And so like the phrase millet dumplings is maybe not something that, rolls off your tongue every day. People might be thinking, oh, are you referring to a French down jacket maker? Like they're not really sure what these things are. And so if asked, like, how would you explain what a kibidango is? I'd say, it's one of the many mochis, but like a millet dumpling, like fantastic. It made me have a better vocabulary as well.
Well, thank you. And you're kindly referring to the English translation I did of Momotaro, which is one of the classic Japanese kids songs, Mr. Peachman. So you can see on Instagram and online, I do an English version of that. And basically, if people don't know, the story of Momotaro is that he's carrying these dumplings and he goes and fights demons, all these sorts of things.
As you do, yeah.
Yeah, as you do. So actually, that was an interesting translation experience because I researched what exactly the type of dumpling was, and it's not the typical one that is kibidango. And I looked it up because kibidango, I think, are traditionally sweet, but the dumpling that the character Momotaro carries, when the story became known, was slightly different, and evidently it has millet. So yes, when I translated these songs, the initial audience was for people or Japanese speakers who know these songs, so they could experience them in English and still have a familiarity of the story. And then afterwards, for each song, I then did what would be called in Japanese kaiuta, where I took the melody and then put completely different lyrics that are useful in English conversation. So for Mr. Peachman, it has a self introduction. I don't know, is this going to be backwards? Yes, it will be. But yeah, so I use the music as a vessel to help people learn more.
Yeah, that's such a good idea, because even if you are able to memorize and sing and like beautifully pronounce the song about carrying millet dumplings, that's not necessarily going to help you. So the whole idea of also adding the kaiuta on the end is kind of like, oh, okay, now this is something I'm actually going to use even more often, and it'll just roll off my tongue the more I sing it along in my head. So that was really a nice touch, I thought.
Thanks.
Did you find that this experience kind of helped you personally? The idea of using music helped you get better at Japanese, and that's what led you to this?
Writing the book, making the music that is the companion to the book that I released on Instagram and online definitely helped me, first of all, have a greater appreciation for Japanese culture and all these songs. And it also, as a learner, I'd say I'm still learning Japanese, as anyone is in a language learning situation. You're always learning. It helped me refine my translation skills doing this. And I just wanted to mention, you sort of dismissed the importance of millet dumplings and things like that.
Oh, did I? Please teach me, Alex.
But this is why music is great, because once you learn the word like millet dumpling in Japanese or in English, you're not going to forget it. And this is why it's great that you mentioned karaoke and songs, is because pronouncing the words, especially a word that sticks out to you, whether it's millet dumpling or something else, develops like the facial muscles and both mental ability and physical ability to pronounce things more clearly. So sometimes I think actually with language learning, the not immediately useful subjects can be really effective at strengthening just like the physical abilities or like pronunciation or listening, because you're sort of focused on those unusual things. And languages, although there are different topics that are more immediately useful in daily life, like having an interview, if you learn how to pronounce things more clearly, you'll be able to greater pronounce more useful words.
Yeah, it's kind of like the side effect of doing one thing while you are unconsciously, automatically training a different part of your brain just because you're not using it actively, but it is still training. That's kind of like going to sleep and listening to a Japanese news podcast, right? Like maybe you don't understand everything and maybe you're already asleep in 5 minutes, but your brain is still listening to those words being, poured into it. So it's kind of like a passive training, which is pretty cool.
Totally. And especially with language learning, even if languages don't seem immediately related, I found from my own experience the process of learning one language, it always helps me with another, even if they're completely unrelated. Like I was learning Italian and things from French would come in, which is understandable because they're related. But then there would be things in Japanese that would remind me, oh, this is kind of like something in Italian. And then I learned a little basic German. And then it was even more like you start having elements that you can reference.
Yeah.
And this is because my understanding is that Noam Chomsky, the great linguistics expert, I think it was him. But in any way, that basically our brains have a framework already for language. So there are sort of like different options of how a language can develop, but they fundamentally come from the same sort of like buffet of conjugations and things. And that if you learn one language, it will help you not only in learning how to study language, study methods, etc., but you will find elements that make it easier to learn the other one. So sometimes people say, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to go to Japan. Should I really study Japanese? Like, isn't this other language more useful? In fact, learning Japanese, if you're passionate about it, and learning English, if you're learning English, will always help you in other activities learning languages, and also possibly in a concrete way with professional opportunities or meeting people.
No, that's very true. Like whenever you see those little moments where these two different things that were completely unrelated start connecting and clicking in your mind, it's just, thank God I did that. It's just a nice little moment of self-appreciation. You are also a French and Italian speaker, and you've also had experience in the German language as well. So I would kind of like to know what made you lean more towards Japanese and not those other languages when you decided to start marketing yourself and, moving forward in your musical career at the same time.
First of all, I will say that I love those languages. I love French. I love Italian. I love all languages. And I can see myself going into those markets in the future. And who knows? Basically, professionally, Japan called to me because I tried to put myself out there learning Japanese in a Japanese class, becoming active in different cultural organizations. And there were people in the Japanese entertainment industry who I was introduced to and who I met and clicked, and it seemed like this was meant to be. So that was helpful. And also, when I researched it more, Japan has one of the biggest music industries in the world. They're big in other things like publishing, etc. So it is feasible as a professional venue also.
This is a little bit related, but I kind of wanted to hear about how you have found the Japanese fan base, because in a lot of different art forms, the Japanese fans are always extremely devoted and supportive and just very, very involved in being a fan of the kind of art or the kind of performance that they just click with. And so I think personally that it's very, very different from other fandoms in other industries and other countries. But how have you found the Japanese fandom to be in relation to yourself?
I found people to be awesome in Japan who speak Japanese, and I don't necessarily like to use the word fan because it implies sort of a hierarchy or distance. I would say audience or friends or learners or students or sometimes they're teachers to me. I learn things from people I communicate with online on Instagram, YouTube, etc. And I found that there is a tremendous creativity from the people who interact on my accounts and who I talk with and who seem to like what I produce. And there are often people who like to create something, or they'll have great pictures or works of art, and they'll share with me. And it seems that a lot of these people really have something to share with the world. So it's really cool that it's not a one way of just me being a creator, but I'm learning and seeing all these things that people who like my content produce.
Have you done any duets on TikTok or anything like that, and maybe co-created something with any of the people who follow you?
Yeah, on Instagram, I've done some collaborations, and those have been really fun. And I'll comment on people's posts if I see something that looks really cool. So please, if you visit my Instagram, Alex York NY, or just look up Alex York, you can drop a comment, and I try my best to respond, and probably check out your account.
So, speaking of your website, when I was navigating around, I saw that you also offer an option for an English Academy on your website. So it's not only, buying your book and following along at home and interacting with the CD, but there's also an online English Academy offered through your website. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what that kind of academy entails?
Yeah, well, thank you for checking it out. The English Academy is a way of improving your English and learning, but my main goal is to really share true English that native speakers use that can help you communicate. So I wanted to give this sort of content, and there's going to be more and more content. And I'm excited for people to learn and have the experience of me as a teacher and sharing the experiences I've had and the language experience I've had, and enabling learners to improve their communication and achieve their dreams through English.
Cool. So it's very, very like practical.
Practical, but always fun. So
that is important.
The important thing, as I mentioned with my book and music, is that having fun is I mean, this also sounds, oh, let's have fun, but it's actually proven by neuroscience that if you enjoy what you're doing, it increases the absorption of the information. So it's really good to have fun. So with all my content, with the Alex York English Academy and things I put on Instagram, and I have an official line that I'm launching, Alex York, and on YouTube, all those things, I always prioritize having being fun for the viewer, and also helping you communicate in the language you're learning.
No, that's very true. I completely agree, especially when you're working with people who are kind of tired and maybe learning the language isn't their number one priority. Just, of course, when you're having fun, you're able to cement things in your mind a little bit more strongly than if you are stressing out, like you said. But I also think you're able to kind of distract yourself, and you can learn without realizing it, which is really nice. And so that way, if you can have a good time, you get through the lesson, or you get through the hard part super quick, and you're just like, oh, I did something yesterday and I learned something. Whew, who knew? Like, that's kind of a nice moment.
It's true, exactly as you're saying. It's sort of learning as a byproduct of enjoying what you're doing.
You are not only an author, you are not only a teacher, but you're also a singer. And as you said, I think earlier, there are so many kinds of singers in the Japanese music industry, because the music industry is so vast here in Japan. So I would like to hear what you think kind of sets you apart from the pack, and like, what do you bring to the table being the Japanese music industry, that kind of makes you pop out, makes you stand out, that people would, veer towards, and people would be interested in your music compared to someone else's?
Well, first of all, I think everyone can coexist. There are all sorts
Impossible.
of great
Impossible. It's a zero-sum world. Nope, can't happen.
No. I think there's a lot of good stuff. I think in my case, happily, people see my passion, and they can sense that I have a lot of love for the music I'm doing and for the listener. And in the case of the music being a way to learn language, I think that they find usefulness in that. So again, enjoying what you're doing, having fun, and then also learning something from it. And there's always, for me, a visual element. Like I like having fun content, even if it's sort of, I don't know about silly or what, but I always try to make something visually interesting, since that's also stimulating to people and more entertaining to look at. And I think I think that judging from television, that when they featured me on Japanese, when I've been featured on Japanese television, what they sort of pick out when describing me, that I'm from New York and I majored in Japanese literature at Yale and I'm a songwriter and translator. This sounds sort of like I'm full of myself or something. That's not. I have many things I'm not good at, but I think that for the audience, there's a mixture of being really passionate as a performer. I kind of also go to the beat of my own drummer, but also having some background that makes them confident in my ability to teach them English or share like culture.
Yeah, because anyone can, pretend to be confident for a music video. They can, jump around and be excited with a few Japanese phrases. But the fact that you do have the background, the fact that you do have so much like very, very easy to see passion for the culture itself is kind of, I think, as you just said, like reassuring for someone who's kind of into it, because they're like, oh, he really loves this. So I want to see too. I want to enjoy with him why he loves this so much. And that's kind of a part that kind of like, sucks you in as an audience member, which is kind of cool, I thought.
Thank you for recognizing that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I spend a lot of time on YouTube during this current pandemic, so I've had nothing to do but watch. Now, where are you looking to go in your career in the next like 5 to 10 years? Like, what is the end game for you? Do you think like you want to kind of push yourself more towards entertainment, push yourself more towards education, kind of stick only in the music industry? Like, which do you think is more appealing to yourself, like in the long run?
I don't think there's an end game. Just like when we were talking about how it's not necessary to set a concrete goal of what you're going to be, as long as you're passionate and make steps in terms of the skills, whether it's learning Japanese or English. So I don't think there's an end game. I always want to be evolving, and I always want to be of service to people learning language or whatever venue it may be. So as long as I'm providing use to others and helping them achieve their goals, then that's cool with me. As far as the form of that, I love entertainment. I love educating. And so I think that those will always be a part of what I'm doing. And especially because they go hand in hand, as we talked about, having fun or listening to music helps you learn things, learn language. And I want to do more philanthropy. I'm expanding my business, interested in entrepreneurial activities that also provide service to people.
Tell me a little bit more about the philanthropy idea. Are you, donating proceeds to certain organizations? Are you setting up different events, stuff like that? Like, how are you involving that in your everyday?
Well, I've donated to Japanese disaster relief after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami and the other unfortunate natural disasters that have happened then. So it's been an honor to contribute to that, to help people. And when the match is right, it's fun to perform with an organization that does something good that I believe in.
That's such a nice experience to be able to maybe go to a certain area or stream to a certain group of people that might need a little bit of a pick-me-up, and just
totally
having the ability to do that and bring a little bit of joy is just really, really nice. So that's fantastic. Is there any part of the entertainment industry that you haven't touched yet, but you would really, really like to dive into? Like, Voice acting, or oh, I really want to be a belly dancer, just something that you just haven't been able to get your fingers into yet.
Well, I enjoy doing narration on Japanese television.
Okay.
So that made me appreciate that it could be fun to do voice acting or something. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and I think if another activity sort of calls, I'm not sure about the belly dancing, who knows, then I'll happily go into the entertainment venues that seem interesting and promising.
Now, Alex, I really, really appreciate you being here with us today because, you are absolutely an expert on everything it means to be an American boy. So I would love to ask you a little bit about what it means to be a Japanese high school girl. And I'm going to put you through a very, very simple, but maybe a little bit informative quiz on what we call in Japan, Joshi Yogo or JK Yogo. So slang that the high school girls often use. How much of an expert would you say you are when it comes to Japanese high school girl slang? Weird question, but
I think I'm in big trouble.
okay. That's probably one of the safest answers. That's fantastic. Question one. The keyword is imifu. Imifu. And it's usually written in katakana. And which do you think is the actual meaning or the correct use of this word, imifu?
I don't know. Imifume?
You are correct. Ding dong, ding dong,
Yeah.
Alex York. 1 point for you.
Yeah, and if someone's learning Japanese, that means the meaning is unclear or like incomprehensible. So imifume becomes abbreviated to imifu. Thank you for teaching me that helpful slang.
Hi, number two. Tenage, tenage. So do you think this could be possibly an agedofu tendan or yubi o 10本上げること, kind of like for an aisatsu, or do you think it refers to tension o agaru koto?
I would guess tension o agaru.
Bing bong, bing bong. You are correct again.
Okay, yeah.
So what does the idea of tension agaru mean? Does your tension ever agaru?
So tension is one of the great false friends from Japanese to English, because in English, tension means like uptight and stressed, but tension means, from my understanding in Japanese, is excitement and enthusiasm. And when I would do Japanese television, the director would sometimes say, "We need more tension. We need more tension." And I think what he was implying is high energy.
Is that
in line with your understanding?
Absolutely it is. I love how you called it a false friend. I never referred to it that before, and it's totally true. All right, let's check out this third one. Very simple, just ri. Does this stand for ryokai, riaru rabu, or hontoni no shoryaku for really? What do you think?
Can you give me an example usage?
Oh, it's going to give it away. Okay. For example, I will be the person sending you a message online, and then your response is just going to be the, okay, let's do a little play acting.
Okay.
ちょっとバスが遅れてて、10分くらい遅れちゃうね。ごめんな。
I'm going to say ryokai.
You got it. Absolutely.
Which means understood or like roger that or got it. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. お疲れ様です。あ
りがとうございます。Wow, okay, that's good. Good to know. Maybe I'm not hopeless if I run into a bunch of high school girls.
You will absolutely not be hopeless. Your new grasp of the Japanese language will help you get through the stickiest of situations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Alex, for being here today. We super appreciate having you here at JLMI and look forward to working together more in the future. Before we finish up, would you like to plug anything or let people know where they can reach you on the internet?
Yeah, I'd love to connect with you guys watching. I'm on Instagram. If you look for Alex York, it should appear Alex York NY. Yes. Also on YouTube. If you look for Alex York or Alex York American Boy, you'll find me. I have an official Line account. Line, if in case new learners are unaware, is the de facto messaging application in Japan. So on Line, if you look at Alex York, I'm there. And my website, alexyork.com, is always a great base to find the newest things that I'm doing. So please contact me, say hello on any of the above platforms. And if you're interested, there is my recently released book, which Momotaro Utao Dake Eigo ga Hanaseru. And it's me surrounded by all sorts of characters from Japanese folk songs. So if you want to learn some Japanese folk songs with English translations, just go to Amazon Japan and look up Momotaro Utao Dake de, or just look up Alex York and you'll find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
And I will now let you get back to your busy morning over there in New York as I get back to my busy evening here in Tokyo.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much again and have a great night. Bye-bye.